Merle Temple. He is an author of 3 latest books, and you did those 3 very fast. You did. I'm going to let him tell you the background to them and his background. Let me turn it over to Merle Temple.
Thanks. It's great to be here tonight. Thank y'all for having us and for coming here to Tupelo, to our place we call home, and to the home and birthplace of Elvis. So on behalf of Elvis, I want to say thank you very much for coming here. And kind of feel like, 1956, my mother started my love of Elvis and his music. She took me to the fair here to see Elvis, and that first big breakout year for him, and Mississippi Alabama Fair and Dairy Show, for those of y'all who are around here and might remember, that was as big as it got here. You had marching bands, and that was a big event every year, and so we went to see Elvis, and I guess as Tupelo feels about y'all like they did that day. More people came to Tupelo and lived in Tupelo that day, but the newspaper, to frame it up in a little play on Elvis's song title, they said, Tupelo ain't nothing but a town agog. A little play on ain't nothing but a hound dog. So thank y'all for coming. I'll tell y'all a little bit about these books and our journey. We have written 3 novels as fiction, as I was telling some of y'all, but taken from my life. And try to capture Mississippi and the South and a lot of things, that I experienced over the last many decades, and also to capture, the grace and the history and the charm and the warmth and tenderness of people, and also, some of the dark side of the fallen world, that we all live in. And Judy and I have told this story from here to yonder. We've been to Hollywood, as my board shows back there when we signed for the cast of Criminal Minds, and I tell you, we've been places we never thought we'd go in our retirement years. And when we're going through Beverly Hills, driving through Beverly Hills, going to an Insider TV show that Criminal Minds set up for me, we were gawking at all the iconic images around us, like the 2 bumpkins from Mississippi that we really are. And I turned and I looked at Judy and I said, Judy, we are the Beverly Hillbillies. So it was quite an experience, and I did that TV show, and the sister of the creator of Mad Men interviewed me, and Mel Gibson's son, Will, mic'd me and powdered my big shiny head, and it was quite an experience. I signed for the cast, and had dinner with the cast of Major Crimes on their lot, and had dinner with the producers of Saving Private Ryan and The Patriot, some of those big blockbuster films, and had a 3-hour dinner, which people would have paid anything to get 15 minutes with him. And so I did the TV interview in Beverly Hills, and also KKLA, the largest Christian station in America, gave me an hour of drive time from 5 to 6 to give my testimony to Southern California. And no one knew me then. It was in 2013. But people told me, you're going to Hollywood, and they said, you're a Christian, you should try to get on KKLA, and they snickered, like that was really going to happen. And I said, well, and I looked on their website, couldn't find any producers who usually book guests, and I hit a little drop down, it came down, showed me all the hosts there, and I didn't know any of them, but when I dropped down, the Holy Spirit said, that's the one. And it was Frank Sontag, and I didn't know Frank. I didn't know he had the largest show on the largest Christian station in America. So I couldn't find a contact for him, so I bet he's got a Facebook page just for his show. So I hopped over, sure enough, there it was, Frank Sontag show, and I said, well, on-air talent just never looks at Facebook. The producers do sometimes. So I said, I'm going to step out on faith, and so I shot a little message into the blind, into that site. I said, well, whatever, and I went back to typing. About 15 minutes later, the phone rang on my desk, and this big radio voice said, Merle, this is Frank Sontag from Los Angeles. And I said, well, hello, Frank. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, something would not leave me alone today. I am never in the station at this time of day, but I had to come. I had to come. And when I got here, I had to look at Facebook. And Merle, you must understand, I never, ever, ever, ever look at Facebook, but I had to. And I saw one message, and I said, I must call this man immediately. And I said, well, Frank, I think this is a God thing. And in that interview, which is up on YouTube, a lot of our interviews are, Frank had me tell that story, and it was quite an adventure out there. And they asked me about the first book and about writing. And the host of Media Mayhem, the show where Mel Gibson's son Mike made a great interview, she said, what is it, about Mississippi? All these great authors coming out of Mississippi, is it something in the water? And I said, no. I said, we love the art of storytelling, something we prize and cherish. And I was raised, if you read my books, you'll see in the first book, I kept the real name of my grandmother, Pearl. And Pearl was my storyteller. She made history come alive for me. She lived with us. She was my buddy and my confidant. When Mother and Daddy was trying to make a living and I'd come home, Pearl was always there. And she would make history come alive for me, and she was, I didn't know it then, but she was my first early role model for the unconditional love that I would find in Jesus Christ later in my life. And she kept a big tin of King Leo peppermint in her room, for those of y'all who remember those. And my Uncle Dave, who worked at TKE's, and he would always bring them down, and we would have those. When I would come by, and she'd say with a long face, she would call me in and say, what's the matter, son? And I said, well, Grandma, this happened, this happened. And she'd get out one stick for her, one stick for me, and suddenly things didn't seem quite so bad. And I write in the books that Pearl dispensed love and peppermint, which to her were one and the same. And now, since the book has spread and everything, when I go to dinners like I did in Atlanta one Christmas, and the folks came and they brought me King Leo peppermints. It's so sweet. And we were over there. I had Ravi Zacharias, for those of y'all who know him, he's one of our heroes, most brilliant man I've ever studied. His wife read A Ghost of Shade of Pale, the first book, and called me to Atlanta, and I had a 2-hour private lunch with him. And we just gave our testimony at Bellevue Baptist, at Ranger Rogers' old church, and we just had so many things happen to us. The Ghost of Shade of Pale, the first in the trilogy, the Michael Parker series, which is really based on me, my life. It is now the all-time best-selling novel in the history of this Barnes & Noble store for North Mississippi and Northwest Alabama. And our local community college English department made it required reading for all English students. English teachers love this book, and they use it in middle school and high school English classes. It's written as literature, and it has no profanity in it, and no graphic, gratuitous intimacy in it, and all those things that the industry wanted me to do. And I'll tell y'all, when I had the first draft of Ghost of Shade of Pale, people in the industry read it and they said, wow, that's pretty good. They said, but you need some neon in it. And I said, neon? How do y'all define neon? And they sent me some of my writing back in it with just the worst profanity you can imagine. And I said, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm writing books to honor God, and if my mother and my English teacher were still living, I would be ashamed for them to read my books. And I stuck to that, and consequently the English teachers can use it. But it was funny, they wanted me to have sex in a book, they wanted me to have profanity in the books, and they're so formula driven. About that time when Ghostly was being pitched, vampires were really hot. And they're so formula driven, they copy everything that was hot last week. And they said, well, could you throw in some vampires? And I said, well, we've got a lot of bad people back in those days, but I don't think any were certified vampires. And then they said, oh, you might want to stop mentioning God. You may offend someone. I said, let me see if I understand. Profanity good, sex good, vampires good, but God not good? I said, no, I can't do any of that. So we stuck to our guns, and people tell me, these are books like they hadn't seen in 60 years. They're like books I used to read when I was young, and we'd have in English classes. And so we're just, happy that we stuck to that and everything. But I promised God that I've been through a lot of hard times and good times in my life, and I promised God I would write 3 books about it. A solemn promise. It got so hard I would have given up, but Judy would often say she'd see me crying at the keyboard of the computer when I was writing, and I was afraid I was killing myself, and I said I would stop, but I promised God, and those are promises you just don't break. And so I promised I'd write 3 books to tell my story and his story, of second chances and redemption, and to travel the country and speak and show people my redeemed life that they might want to meet my Redeemer. And so I love the reviews on the books are good. We get some in, I read them, they're so good. You know, I don't know what they were drinking when they read the book, and, you know, but we're so glad we met so many nice people. Southern Reader magazine in Atlanta, just for my birthday, they sent a little quote to us that we could share, and they're great friends now. They've reviewed all 3 books in Atlanta, and they said Merle Temple is to writing what Rembrandt was to art. He creates written masterpieces. And American Family Radio, I've been on there many times, they asked me about some of these superlatives, and I said, well, I don't know about any of that. I said, wow, it sure does look good on the book covers. And so we're just having a great time. The books, like I said, are written as fiction. The first book chronicles growing up in Lee County in the Tupelo area here, a different time, the 50s and 60s. Then going to where Judy and I went to high school together. We rode the same school bus, graduated a class in Nettleton of 45 people. We have a little story later, and when I came home from Washington, where I worked for the FBI and met J. Edgar Hoover and all that, I was in my uncle's restaurant, TKE's, downtown here in Tupelo in '69. I went in there to see my Uncle Dave, and who made that famous potato salad old Tupelo loves. And I saw Judy, and I hadn't seen her since high school, and I went over to say hi to Judy, and she was having lunch with Susan Jackson, who worked with her at the city that summer, and I wound up asking Susan out, and we were married 3 months later. And then as I was commuting to finish my last year at OMS, Judy called one night in early 1970 and said her and her husband, to be Jerry Bates, were going to run off to the Justice of Peace in Verona, right south of here, and get married. Would we go with them? So the 4 of us loaded up. I was best man and photographer, and Susan was maid of honor. At a 4-person wedding, all the pictures that Judy's children and grandchildren have of that wedding I took with a little Polaroid camera. And then Susan and Jerry passed away in 2007. The Lord led us back together, so I tell everybody, I've been to both of Judy's weddings. I was best man and bestest man. And so, you know, God works in mysterious ways, and we're having a great time. But a ghostly shade of pale picks up Michael Parker and me. When I leave the Ole Miss in the early 70s, the first drug war has been declared. I decide foolishly that must be the place for me. And so I go off into the State Bureau of Narcotics when it and the DEA were brand new. And I found out that the world was just not at all like I thought it was. It wasn't a nice, neat, ordered place, you know, where the good guys wore white hats and bad guys wore black hats, like in the old Western serials I used to watch. And, you know, it was very different than that. And I went undercover when there weren't very many of us. You got in trouble, you were all on your own. And then I was held hostage in South Mississippi when heroin dealers decided they were just going to kill me and to keep their money and be ahead of the game. They held me hostage at midnight in a little shack down near Mississippi-Louisiana border, and where they debated where to dump my body after they'd kill me. And one of them sitting across from me pulled out the old double-edged razor blades, for those of y'all, the men who remember those. Those things would cut the end of your fingers off if you didn't watch them. You dropped them into the razor. And he put them into his mouth and he bit them. He bit down on them. I'm sorry y'all eating. But he bit down on them, he twisted, he broke them, he swallowed them. And he bled out, and blood gushed out of his mouth like a bad vampire movie. And he put his hand in his mouth, asked me if I wanted some, and I don't believe I'd care for any. And then he got a big box of long stem kitchen matches full. We got the flame of them all going at once, and he swallowed the fire. My whole life flashed before my eyes. Saw myself as a toddler, things buried in my subconscious, things I couldn't consciously recall. With my little toddler, with my parents, with my mother and daddy, beautiful images. But I would not recommend the stimulus it took to get there. And so I survived that by the grace of God. It's all in the books. Then I was lured out by contract killers hired by the Dixie Mafia when we hit a big organized crime stronghold that had taken over all of DeSoto County, bought up a lot of political protection and police protection. And it was a kind of almost a mirror image of the original Walking Tall movie, if y'all remember that. And some of the real people from McNairy County were actually in that syndicate. And the Dixie Mafia, some of those guys, some of the regular Mafia families out of New Orleans and St. Louis. And we hit them and made everybody mad. And then I got a call from a guy, well, my foreman first on the inside called me to say there'd been a meeting of all the factions about pooling their money and hired someone to kill me. And I said, oh no, they're not going to do that. It's bad business. The wrath of the world would come down on them. She said, no, they're serious. And then I get a call from a guy wanting to give me information. He said, you missed some people in that raid, and I'd give them to you. I felt bad about it, but I agreed to meet finally at the Horn Lake exit south of Memphis. And after I left the house, my foreman called the house to talk to Susan and said, I need to get a hold of Merle. She said, well, he's gone. And she said, well, get a hold of him and tell him it's a setup or going to kill him. And she hung up. My police radio had gone out and the highway patrol couldn't raise me. And I was going north on 55, pulled my gun out, put it underneath my belt. Got there was not one but two waiting for me. I should have just drove off, but I was young, thought I was immortal. Jim Clemente, Criminal Minds, who's a former FBI agent and top profiler, he screamed at me. He said, what were you thinking? I said, I thought I'd live forever, Jim. I was bulletproof. And that wound up into a standoff, and so many things happened in the Bureau days. But then later I became the first captain in the agency over the north half of the state. And we were doing a heroin deal in Columbus. They were flooding Mississippi State, MSCW then, MUW now, with high-grade heroin to create a heroin addict population, real high-purity heroin, and they'd come back later and cut the purity down to increase their profit margins. So people had to buy more and more and more to feed their habit. So we had bought off of them, my agents had bought off of them, and we were going to do a big buy-bust for a large amount to draw out their backers, where we would do the deal and arrest, come in and arrest everybody. And so we were setting that deal up, and the agents were gathering in a hotel room in Starkville. And I was leaving my office in Tupelo at the old T&S building, which has been torn down now, and right by the post office. And I was running late, as always, as you can tell you. And I ran downstairs, jumped in my car, cranked up, put my hand on the gear shift, and when I did, something happened to me that never happened to me before. I knew I had the favor of God in my life. I could feel it and understand it. I ran from it. I was a very nominal Christian, engaged in full-blown works-based salvation, thinking I could be as good as I could be. And one day they'd weigh it all out, and they'd say, well, come on in. Of course, it doesn't work like that. But that day when I jumped in the car and put my hand on the gear shift, the Spirit filled up my car, wrapped all around me, all through me, permeating every molecule in my body, massaging me. It was to try to reduce it down to something that we can understand, like touching the face of God. And said to me, go back and get the bulletproof vest. And it was gone. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, where did that come from? I'm losing my mind. You know, I said, you know, I've been working too hard, you know, what is that? And I said, we don't have any reason to believe it's more dangerous than usual. No one wore a vest in those days. Everybody does now, but no one did then. We only had two vests, and they had no armor in them. They were like nylons, stop up to a small handgun maybe. That's all we had. Agents didn't like to wear them. They were bulky and hard to conceal, even though it was in November. And I said, I don't know where that came from. I'm losing my mind. I put my hand back on the gear shift. Spirit came right back in my car, all around me, all through me. It wasn't optional this time. Go back and get the vest. And I said, okay, okay. I did, and I met the agents, and we set up the parameters of the deal. Needless to say, I was getting pretty nervous about it all by this time. And I said, I want you to wear these vests. Oh, we don't want to. And I said, no, don't ask me why, just humor me. And they did. I said, keep it in town in Columbus so we can stay close to you on surveillance, have buildings to hide behind. It's tough to be out in the country where you see for 2 miles, they say, who are those guys following us? You know, and, but it got away from them. They got out in the country on south of town, kind of south down past the W, and this road, it wound around, high embankment, you know, deep depressions on either side, and railroad crossed up here, so there was a big high railroad trestle. And right here was a clump of pine trees, and that's where they put the sniper. The sniper was sitting there with a high-powered rifle. And we were on the fringe listening to him on the body mics, cutting in and out, in and out. I'm going crazy because after the experiencing what I did in my car. And so suddenly it cuts out, and then it cuts back on, and we hear tow, 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 tow. And agents erupt all around, and it's Merle, they're under fire, they're under fire. We come across the levee, Chief of Intelligence, Clay in the books, and we caught in the crossfire. Gunsmoke just hanging over the entire area. You know, the thickest clouds rolling, dark charcoal clouds, squeezing every bit of life out of the earth, it seemed. Came a hard freeze, everything from Jackson to Corinth and Memphis with a sheet of ice later that night. And it was just like you were at the intersection between heaven and hell, right on the precipice at the abyss, and you were staring into and looking at some things that were just awful and evil. And it all intersected, you know, right there, and the gun battle kept on, and people were firing, and the female agent radioed me and said, Merle, Jerry's hit bad, he's hit bad. And I got to get him to the hospital. I said, go. And then finally, the sniper fled, and I left the chief of intelligence in charge of the crime scene. I took off to the hospital, met the first responders coming out to us from our calls for help and backup. And I got to the hospital, comforted the young female agent. She was barely 21. She'd just seen her officer, her agent, her best friend, hit 3 times. She just shot the first person because he stepped back and went into his coat to draw his weapon. And she shot him right through the wrist as he was growing out. And I went in and arrested him because he'd come there for medical treatment. And I walked into the ER, and there was my friend Jerry. They were cutting his clothes off of him. And that white bulletproof vest that God set me back for was now crimson soaked in blood. And I walked up, the doctor, I get chill bumps now, and 40 years later, I always do. I walked up to the doctor, and the doctor said, look at this, Merle. He said, one round hit him in his lower extremities, one sliced through his arm, and this one hit him right in the chest. He said the rifle round penetrated the vest because it wasn't designed to stop a high-powered rifle. But it deflected it and took some of the punch out of it. So it went in behind his right breast, skittered around the barrel of his rib cage, and popped out behind his left breast. He said, Merle, if he hadn't had that vest on, taking out his heart and lungs, he'd have been dead before he hit the ground. Get chill bumps all the way down to my toes right now. I want to tell you, you could hear the murmurs, you could feel the shuffles of angels' feet around us there in that ER. You know, and I went on in life, investigated a corrupt governor, where they tampered with my witnesses. I had to call and threaten to resign and call a news conference if they didn't stop, and we won that battle. But then they began to try to find ways to frame me, to tar me, so they could come after me because the press liked me. And that's standard operating procedure then and now in government. Powerful people in government will do anything to protect power, and they will bring the full power of government against you. And once they're through with you in the press, they'll have everybody convinced that you are the bad guy and they are the good guys, when in fact it's just the opposite. So I finally got so bad, and my position was just not, it was untenable, and I had to leave the agency that I left, that I loved. And the corporate world had just come along and offered me a job as security manager in the Bell system. And I reluctantly went into that, and I thought maybe at last things were going to be simpler, but I also got into high-level politics, which is probably not the smartest thing I ever did, but I did meet some of the great iconic figures of the 20th century, and just had a lot of, unusual situations and experiences that were all a part of the plan. I discovered that the organized crime figures who tried to kill me in a ghostly shade of pale in the Bureau days, they were just choir boys compared to the political criminals that I would encounter in what I call the unholy trinity of politics, crime, and business in America that's recounted in the rented world. And so many things, happened there, and went well, and I got transferred to Georgia. I worked my way up in the company, became the spokesman for the company in East Georgia, flying in and out of Washington, on the corporate jets, come by and get me, and those heady little trips that we'd take, going up there at Congress, and riding past the White House at night, and had broadcasts in the U.S. Chamber studios, and all those type things. But I discovered that none of that's real. It's all an illusion. And remind me of the story I tell in Rented World, where there's a man, he's bringing his parrot to Congress to put on a presentation, and his parrot goes everywhere with him in all sorts of different places. And when they walk into the halls of Congress, the parrot is looking left, he's looking right, and the parrot goes honky-tonk. And he's looking at all the people walking past, all the congressmen and senators. He says, honky-tonk, and the man says, no, no, no. He said, we're in Congress now. The parrot looks around again, he goes, juke joint. And he said, no, no, no. He said, he's hoping the people wouldn't hear him. He said, no, I told you, we're in Congress. And the parrot goes, roadhouse. And he goes, no, no. He said, we're not there, we're in Congress. And the parrot says, same people. And so it's learned a lot the hard way. I managed a campaign. I became the top-rated manager for the corporation in my department for 12 straight years. Gave me every award that they could manufacture, make up, but all of it left me empty because I had a big hole in my heart that I was trying to look for to fill it up with something from the world. And the world had nothing to offer me to fill up that, and the awards meant less and less, and I was already on down the road looking for the next challenge, and I always thought that there was a simplicity on this side of complexity in life, and that if you just worked hard enough, tried hard enough, and studied, and you break through that wall of complexity, and you burst out on the other side, and there you would find the true simplicity in life, and that peace that I had so desperately been seeking, not knowing that it was Jesus Christ there with me all along. And so I got involved in a campaign that I ran against a corrupt incumbent, and this young woman decided to challenge him, and I want to tell y'all, it's not like you think. The best person runs, they win, it's all, by the Marcus Queensberry rules or something, and it's really not. The incumbent called me, the legislator called me at my house, and he threatened me, screamed at me, he said, Merle, I'm going to run her out of town, I'm going to run her out of Georgia, I'm going to break up her marriage, I'm going to destroy her, I'm going to destroy her. And then the editor of the newspaper, the big daily newspaper, he called me and he said, you're going to stop this. We know you're behind it, where you're raising money for. He's our guy, he's our bag man, he brings money to my publisher. So you're going to stop this. We've been very good to you. Part of the good image you have in this part of the country, we're responsible for it. We made you, and we can break you. Well, I doubled down, and we beat the incumbent, the lady did, what they call the biggest upset in Georgia in 50 years. And everything was good, but then the politicians in Atlanta called in my corporate leaders and they say, no legislation of yours moves until you mute him, you punish him, you put him in his place, you neutralize him. So they called me into Atlanta, broke my heart, the company I loved, and they said, who do you think you are? Right and wrong? What's that? You're not God. If you're going to stop these little crusades that you're on. You're going to go back. You're going to make money for us like you always have. You're never going to have another independent thought. You're never going to utter another independent opinion in your life while you're working for us. And it broke my heart, and I couldn't live with that. I asked and demanded a early separation, early retirement package. And I left, and my congressman, who was glad that I helped defeat the corrupt guy, was trying to get me an appointment in the new administration as U.S. Marshal, based on my bureau background. But the other incumbents, they didn't like it because I just defeated an incumbent. Never mind, they didn't like him. But he was an incumbent. If I came after him, I could come after them. And so they blocked that, and I wound up taking an appointment as Deputy State Superintendent of Education in Georgia. Should have stayed home with my wife, who had been very ill, but we packed up and went to Atlanta looking for one last great battle. You know, wanted to go slay the dragons and tilted windmills like Don Quixote, and should have stayed home because I got there and I found that the dragons were bigger and nastier than I had ever imagined, and they were waiting to gobble me up. We got caught in a battle between the state superintendent and the governor of different parties, and he wanted to steal all of her education money to build a shadow government, and extra legal or illegal shadow government. And we said no. We went to Washington to try to end run us. Then the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education, and later the U.S. Secretary himself, contacted me and said, "Hold the line, Merle, hold the line. We'll prosecute anybody that diverts federal ed money." So we did, and then the governor cut a deal with the White House, illegally. Cut a deal with the White House and trashed the Constitution to get him to endorse No Child Left Behind. For any of y'all who know what that is, a terrible bill. And so they called us from the White House, a friend, and said they're throwing y'all under the bus. And then the U.S. Secretary and all them were nowhere to be found. I got a conference call with all these politicos from from Washington, and they told me, "We're going to let them steal all they want. And to make it easier, we're going to stop sending hundreds of millions of dollars in education money to the only legal recipient in Georgia, the Georgia Department, and send it directly to a board that the governor controls, which hadn't even had no means to receive and disperse money." And so that a big battle ensued, and we were sweeping the office for wiretaps. The state troopers were telling us, "Be careful out on the road," because they just had meetings in the state trooper huts, telling them if they catch y'all out on a campaign trail, because she was running for governor by then, to stop you, to arrest you, to hurt you, to jail you. Now, would every trooper do that? Certainly not. But believe me, there are some who would. You know, because we battled that in the bureau days. The guys who were, they were political. It was political. It wasn't principle. And so many things happened. We began to battle them, try to keep the money from them, and then she lost narrowly in the election, and then they indicted us. The feds indicted us. The last of the Boy Scouts, nobody could believe it. They indicted us, and it's a long story. I don't have time to tell y'all, but it was all in God's plan. And I had to leave my wife, who I'd been a caregiver for decades. I realized finally what I had put at risk. And the government wanted me to say things, you know, that weren't exactly true. And when I wouldn't, they locked me up again so I couldn't testify in an awful jail in Atlanta. But it was there in that jail in Atlanta where I surrendered to Christ, and He broke me. If y'all ever read Chuck Colson's Born Again, I could have written that book. And he's one of my heroes, he and Robbie Zacharias, who I had a 2-hour private lunch with in Atlanta. And so I had to leave, and I went inside for a long time because I wouldn't go along and get along. But there we began what became the most successful inmate-led prison ministry in the history of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And The Redeemed just came out. It tells that part of that last big part of the story and how God used that. And He showed me when I surrendered to Him in Atlanta in that jail, I was in isolation because I was so high profile they were afraid they would kill me. and no one had ever seen me. But when I surrendered, all of those men, tough men, began to come to my door to sit on the floor and look at me through the slot in the door and to confess to me murder, horrible crimes, and I didn't understand. I said, God, I don't understand. I'm so inadequate. And he said, you have always reached down a helping hand to people to lift them up. Now that you might understand Christ and his coming down to humanity, I'm going to bring you down into a world you have never experienced. And it changed my life. And if I can, a part of me says, thank God for that, for prison, because it was there, like many famous people in life, where I saw God, doing things that only he could do. The fences couldn't keep him out. He was everywhere. And there are just so many great stories in the Redeemed about the movie ministries we started and the men who accepted Christ, and big tough men who had never darkened the door of a church, but they'd come to a Christian movie because they understood movies, and you'd hear them in the dark start to weep as their hearts were opened and softened to approach the Holy Spirit. And so just so much to tell. And then God, toward the end of that long journey, he sent Judy to me. And Judy came, and we figured out right away, because she'd lost Jerry, I'd lost Susan, we were all close, and we figured out right away this wasn't friendship anymore, that God was moving. And so we were married in 2010 in the visiting room at Millington Prison Camp, there in Millington outside of Memphis. And we still are friends with so many people from those days, and we had some horrible things happen inside to me. They don't like Christians. The cross cannot be displayed inside the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Every other religious symbol can be displayed, but the cross cannot be displayed. There's something about the cross that terrifies the Messianic state. And I was rebuked many times for the little cross around my neck that I clutched many nights going to sleep, not knowing if I would wake up the next morning. It was just me and the Lord, but that was plenty for a long time. And he helped me, began to show me how to write A Ghostly Shade of Pale, and guided me with the beginning of that book. And he has opened doors since I've been home. The only God can open doors that everybody said that those things could never happen. But we go forward expecting them to happen, because we just see miracles out on the road all the time. And it was through all of that, those ups and downs and that pain and things that I never expected to happen in my life, that brought me, to the cross, to that day that I crawled to the foot of the cross and said, Master, I have ruined this life. May I have another? And when all that mercy and grace poured out on me from his wounded side, everything changed. Everything changed. And whatever price I had to pay to get there, at that moment, to know that love, that overwhelming love and that peace, it was all nothing to pay. It was costly grace is what we should always seek, and not cheap grace. So I tell you all that I took a walk in the woods with God, in the dark woods, but I came out on the other side, taller than the trees. And I could see all the way from the drug wars to the political wars in Georgia, to prison, to Hollywood. We went out to Hollywood, all the way right here tonight with the Altrusa Club. And I understood everything then. And, I tell people that I got nothing that I asked for in life, but everything I could have hoped for. And among men, I am most blessed. Thank y'all, and God bless you. Be glad to sign some books for you.